Hey everybody, Pastor Ryan here with you today with a special encourager for you that revolves around the life and times of God's servant Noah. Noah is a very special name in our household. Our oldest son bears the namesake of that faith heritage. In fact, there's an icon here next to me that celebrates the Noahic covenant, the promises given to Noah with the sign of the rainbow in the days when the earth was finally dry and the waters had receded. For the likes of Noah, it's said comically that Noah never left the ark. In fact, he was able to put up with the stench of the animals inside because the storm outside of the ark was so much greater. That might have us smile just a little bit when we think about our own personal zoos in life, if we should treat the places we live as if they were the ark. What's paramount to Noah's story is the fact that for as much as we reflect on a true quarantine, that is 40 days and 40 nights, we see that holy number repeated throughout times of perseverance and endurance in Scripture. 40 days and 40 nights, we may recall, is the long-time storm that happened in Noah's day as the flood waters kept rising. But you might want to know that Noah had a little bit more patient endurance than that. In fact, he was on the ark much longer than 40 days and 40 nights. I want to take you to a couple of places in the book of Genesis that help us to remember that patient and hard-won endurance that came by way of Noah following each of God's commands until the earth finally dried and, as Genesis says, the heavens were finally closed. And so with that, maybe going back to your own Bibles, you can open and follow along with me. In Genesis chapter 6, we get to find the beginnings of the flood account, and I want to begin reading there, sharing verses 1 through 8. The flood, Genesis 6. When men began to increase in number upon the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men, and had children by them. These were heroes of old, men of great renown. The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on the earth had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil, and evil all the time. And so it was that the Lord was grieved that he had made man on earth, and his heart was filled with pain. And so the Lord said, I will wipe mankind whom I have created from the very face of the earth, men and animals and the birds of the air, for I am grieved that I have made them. And then in verse 8 we hear this word, Noah, of all people, Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. As the account continues, it's Noah personally who receives instruction from God to build, to fashion the ark, and to make preparations not only to gather into the ark all that was needed, including species from creation, but Noah's own family. As we move forward into the account, there was the time in which Noah and his family and the animals boarded the ark, and they waited for the flood waters to come. After the time spent on the ark, we find a couple of unique dates that bookend Noah's experience, and also then celebrating the great return to the earth as the ark opened and Noah's family and the animals were able to come out. Here's what we find in Genesis chapter 7 in verse 11 at the beginnings of the flood. In the 600th year of Noah's life on earth, on the 17th day of the second month, on that day all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened, and rain fell upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. On that very day Noah and his sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth, together with his wife and the wives of his 3 sons, entered the ark. As Genesis moves forward from chapter 7 into chapter 8, we have a wonderful word of remembrance as the floodwaters cease. But before we come back to the meat of that sandwich, we want to get to the end of the flood and celebrate the real time that Noah and his family endured with good patience. In Genesis chapter 8, beginning at verse 14, before God signs his personal covenant with Noah with the sign and seal of the rainbow, Genesis 8, verse 14 celebrates the conclusion of the account in this way. Again, by the 27th day of the second month, the earth was completely dry. God said to Noah, "Come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring out every kind of living creature that is with you, the birds, the animals, and all the creatures that move along the ground, so they can multiply upon the earth and be fruitful and increase in number upon it." And so Noah came out of the ark together with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives, all the animals and all the creatures that move along the ground and all the birds, everything that moves upon the earth came out of the ark, one kind after another. Now, if you think about the day in Noah's life when he entered the ark with his family, to the day that he was blessed to walk off of the ark in good health, you don't simply have 40 days and 40 nights. In fact, by most commentary study, you have the fullness of what we would call a lunar year. And to that end, we celebrate some 354 to 360 days on the ark, plus 10 days, a total of 370 days that Noah and his family were on the ark. Not just a simple 40 days and 40 nights, no simple quarantine. But in the midst of quarantine, perhaps we can remember how God remembers. In the same way that Noah somehow found favor in the eyes of the Lord, it was during the flood, the meat of the sandwich, that we return to in Genesis chapter 8, hear the word of the Lord's remembrance, and then see again Noah's response in the day of deliverance. In Genesis chapter 8, we hear these words in the midst of the flood. God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and the livestock that were with him in the ark, and he sent a wind over the earth. The waters receded. Now the springs of the deep and the floodgates of the heavens had been closed, and the rain had stopped falling from the sky. After that time of the ark coming to rest on Ararat, celebrating the great exodus from the ark as a little remembrance of baptism, we get to hear and see Noah's great health and livelihood as he obeyed every command of the Lord, and even after great deliverance, Noah made this response. In Genesis chapter 8, verse 20, to close the chapter, after each kind of animal and every living family member of Noah's family came off the ark, Noah built an altar to the Lord. Taking some of all of the clean animals and clean birds, he sacrificed burnt offerings on the altar. The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, and he said in his heart, "Never again will I curse the ground because of man, even though every inclination of his heart is evil from childhood, and never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease." And so it is perhaps today, looking beyond the 40 days and 40 nights and celebrating yet again that we as the people of God are capable of hard things because we have a God who accomplishes the impossible. In the day that we are delivered, being able to leave our homes to gather again as if we were Noah and his family leaving the ark, I pray God's endurance to bless your heart, that he would lift the weights of anxiety off of your heart, your mind, and your shoulders, and that you too would look forward to a day when finally all of these things will come to recede and we'll be able to gather again. In the meantime, perhaps don't celebrate this quarantine as a time of self-exile or restriction. Instead, perhaps celebrate that we're not restricted, We're only limited, and we still have opportunity to proclaim the hope that we have within us. May God bless you as you remember your baptism from God's own flood waters, and as you look forward to the day when you will again walk on the dry ground of God's deliverance, because He will see you through. Take care, good health to you, safety, and above all, God's peace.